Hi, it's Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm. Today we are loom knitting a baby bonnet, and I have started it already to get to a certain point. I'm not going to show you how to loom knit. I'm using the simple E-wrap or stocking net stitch, whichever one you want to refer to it as. And this is a project video, so I'm assuming you already know how to loom knit. So I'm just showing you the technique I used and how I made this baby bonnet. So first of all, I used a loom. It's an adjustable loom, and I used 45 pegs, and I used it in like a semi-rectangle. I didn't use this side of it, so I used these parts here. So 45 pegs total. I loom knitted for approximately 4 inches of knitted fabric. I did not do a cuff or a brim. I loom knitted for the 4 inches worth of knitted fabric. So what we're going to be doing is a T pattern. When you get done, you'll have a T, knitted T, and when we'll construct the bonnet by sewing the, it will fold it like a bonnet. It would be like an, like a fold around the head, and the T will be in the longer part of the T will be in the back, and we'll sew the sides to that back part. How do we get the T? So I've loom knitted the 4 inches of fabric on the 45 pegs. On the completion of my last row of the 4 inches, whichever end you end up in, or wherever you end, you got to work your way back to the middle. So on 45 pegs, 22 pegs was my center, and I think I miscounted a bit, so I think my T is going to be off a little bit. So we'll see how that is when we get it off the loom. I may have to, innovate a bit and tweak it, but I want to count to the middle. So on 45 pegs, it's going to be about 22. And then I did it 11 pegs wide. And what I was aiming for was to have it the same width as the other section when it came off the loom. It's measuring about 3 inches off the loom. So I'm assuming that probably the 4 inch will also come out about the same. It's always about a ½ inch to an inch, sometimes more depending on how many pegs and how far apart your pegs are, difference than what you knitted it on the loom. It shrinks up when you take it off the loom. Work towards back to the middle. Well, I just marked my middle. I just sort of made like a little line. I gouged a little line on there. It wears off again with the next project in the wood. And then I knew I wanted it the same width, so I counted 11 pegs. And then I found I had to count, the half over here to see where I started. So I got here, worked my way back here, and then I began this. So what you do is you're just going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you're not going to continue along over here. So as you do that, the back and forth on the 11 pegs, it starts to form, looks sort of like the bottom of underwear right now, starts to form another section. And this part is still the same. When we're ready to move on, which I am, and I'm going to show you, we will just continue on over here, and then we'll take it off the loom. So I have knitted about, and I needed it to be the same, so these sides here are what's going to sew onto here. So I needed it to be about the same length, and that was about 7 inches, I think. And here's where it got a little screwy, because one side is actually longer than the other. I'm hoping by not much. That's 7. It looks like this side's going to be maybe a ½ to an inch longer than this side. So we'll have to see. I might have to sew it, take up a hem or something, but we'll figure it out when we get there. So I have knitted for, let's see, 6½. So I'm going to do another row. So I'm just going to go back and forth on these same center pegs here, and you always check to make sure you don't want to connect. You don't want it to hook back over here where we stop. It needs to be. You can see where the break is here, where we started doing the separate section. You need to make sure every time you get there that you've checked to make sure you haven't connected it, because if it connected, you have a real mess on your hands, and you'll probably have to undo it all, because you can't just cut it. Well, I guess you could cut it and unravel it, and then you'd have to tie your string back together. Right now it's about 6½, and I am using a lightweight, it's a 3, and I'm using 2 skeins of baby pink and 161 yards each skein. And the reason why I'm using 2 skeins is because I wanted it a little thicker than it actually was. I've gotten it to where I want it lengthwise. And what we're going to do, cut my string. I'm using this long, I got these long needles that I use. If you watch any of my other loom knitting videos, I prefer these long upholstery needles with the big eyes that you can get because it gives you a lot of room to work with. We're going to take off just this middle section, and you're just going to take it off the loom like you would normally. You're going to put each loop onto your yarn. And then that T section, that longer T section will come off the loom like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I don't want to cinch it, but I do want to hold it flat. Sort of, I'm going to go through 2 loops at a time and just sort of loop through it just to give it a little bit of stability there. So I'm going through, and then I'm coming back, and I'm sort of pulling it off. In just a minute here, I'll show you what I've done here. It's the end. Now I'm going to double back and make sure this is very secure. I'm just going to leave that yarn attached. I tied it like in a knot. I'm going to leave that there because we can use that to sew it when we come back. Now, we need to get the other parts off of the loom. So I'm going to make sure I have ample yarn here. It's not attached to the current project, obviously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through here the very end. And I'm just going to tie it in a knot right here at the end on the yarn, on the first loop. I'm going to do a double knot, make sure it's very tight. Okay. Alright, and then I'm going to take this until we get to the center section. Okay, and we've come to the middle. Okay, now what do you do when you get to... You can see that we have a gap here from the 2 pieces. So I'm just going to go from that loop to this loop here. And I'm just going to pull it straight as if it was all hooked together. And you might need to tighten it just a bit to bring those loops a little closer. Alright, at this point I'm going to grab 2 loops, and I do want to keep that gap from opening up again. So I'm sort of holding it taut there. Alright, now I got that piece. Here's the top of our T and the long T. Now, how are we going to get to the other side? I'm just going to weave sort of through. I'm going to weave more underneath whenever I can, just you know, 1 thread at a time sort of thing. I don't want it real noticeable from the front is the idea here, because the idea is we just want to get to the other side with as least amount of visibility as possible. Okay, so you can see that it's not real noticeable. I've gone across. Okay, so now I'm right here where the next loop is. So I'm going to go under where the other loop was when we took it off. And now I'm just going to start taking it off my loom. Okay, so now you can see the T. You can also see how I got it off center because I miscounted, but maybe we can fix that. Okay, so I'm going to do what I did on the end of the last one. I'm going to sort of go through 2 loops at a time, 2 loops at a time. And I'm going to double back through and grab the other 2. Alright, now I've come to that, and so I want to go over to the other side, so I'm going to make this into a knot. I already have yarn on this side to sew with, so I don't need it over here. So make sure that's a knot. Alright, so I'm going to come over here. I want to sort of stabilize this side, because you can see it's still sort of movie. It moves back and forth on there. So that is done. So I'm going to come back to this side, and we're going to do some sewing here. This side is longer than this side. I'm probably going to have to do some tweaking on this side to make them the same. Can't just cut it because it's not like fabric. So, alright, so working on the inside out here, just like it's fabric, I'm going to use pins. Pin it together. So we can see this is the inside out of the bonnet. Clear that one side is obviously shorter than the other, and this I actually over knitted, so I probably should have stopped. So we're going to have to make everything match the short side because you can't cut it off to be folded up. And if you don't have any flaws, you won't have to do this. If you knitted the right dimensions, which I did not, I messed up. So if you did the right dimensions, then all you're going to do is sew these 2 pieces together and your bonnet is formed. Because I overshot on this mid piece and I overshot slightly on this side, I'm going to have to do hems. I'm going to sew a fabric liner and put it into the bonnet. So we got that. That's where that's going to have to go. This side is going to be slightly less of a problem. I'm just going to have to turn it up just a little bit to make it equal. So where's my yarn hook? My yarn is hooked here. So we'll fix this first. Let's just like we're hemming something, sort of do a whip stitch. How am I going to get to back here is where we want to start. I'm just going to weave this in and out. Like I said, if you don't have this, if you didn't overshoot like I did, then you don't have this problem. So you can just sort of watch till we get to this end over here when I have this section fixed on my thing. So that little problem fixed. Alright, so if you didn't make any mistakes, you're just going to start right here and we're just going to sew these 2 sections of the bonnet together. Bottom loops here, and I want to make sure it's really good at the base. Together. Okay. Now I'm going to take that off there. Alright, now we're back to this side over here. So you can see this sort of the inside of the bonnet there. We'll have to flip that out. Alright. Alright, since I have this issue over here, I'm going to start over here, and I have a little tail from the knitting, so I'm going to tie this yarn on there, and then I'm going to push all of that inside of this little part that I have to hem up. So I've done my hem. Again, remember, if you didn't overshoot like I did, I have miscounted in the center, my center T, so I sort of knew that I was probably going to have problems because I didn't count right when I started knitting. also have this sort of going through 3 layers here, making sure I have the two out, the two. Alright, and when I get to the top, do a couple stitches. Want to make sure it's not coming out. Okay, let me turn it right side out. So you see the back of the bonnet, the front of the bonnet. I made a pattern for the liner, and I will scan this pattern so you can have it available to you. So now we're going to sew the lining together, and I'm going to pin this here and pin this here. So I'm going to go ahead and sew. Okay, and then I'm going to sew the other side. The bonnet, and I've sewn the lining together, and what I want to do is I want to, right now it's like inside out, so I want to fold it so it's right side out, and I want to put the satin, the good part that I want to show, against the inside right side of the bonnet. Now, since I want to line up my back center sections, I am also going to be leaving, I'm going to put a pin here, but I'm going to be leaving this open. I'm not going to sew this section here. Alright, now I want to, since I'm dealing with knitted fabric, it stretches a little bit. So I want to keep my hand in here so I can keep everything lined up. And I'm going to pin we're going to leave this bottom part open. We don't want to sew that because that's where we're going to turn it right side out at. Alright, so I'm going to start right here then at the seam. I am going to sew through the seam. Okay, and I'm going to sew just like if I was sewing fabric and fabric. Confident about that satin not unraveling on me, so I went and I hit it with the zigzag around the edges just like you would regular fabric. Alright, now I'm going to let that needle and thread hang in there so we can close it up. Satin under. I'm going to use the rest of my needle and thread here. Just sewing a whip stitch as small as possible. I've went down to 1 instead of the double strand thread. I went down to 1. Here we have it so far. And now we're going to make the ties. There we go. Looking cute there. Now you could do a decorative, I was thinking I wanted to, but now that I look at it, I think I might just want to leave it. It's sort of cute the way it is, but I am going to make decorative rosettes and ties for the side. I'll show you how we're going to do that. So I have double-faced satin ribbon, and this is what I prefer whenever I'm sewing because it doesn't matter which side is facing you because both sides have the nice satin trim on it. Approximately 14 inches. So that's how long I want the tie. So I'm going to hold that. So now I want to make the rosette, you just sort of want to put your, like, fold it like a fan, like loops. So when you get about 3 of them, do about 3 of them. Make a couple of stitches so you can secure them together. Now make, depending on how full you want your rosette, I'm going to do 3 more. Now I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail here. Cut it at a slant. And I have this little you can fold it out like a flower there. So I'm going to try to do that. Now I want to put a stitch up through the center of my, like, little flower there, sort of hold them out in place. Fold out and to get my little rosette how I like it here. Remember, we've got that tail on the back to use as a stabilizer here. Alright, come back up through here. Try to climb up there. Alright, I'm going to put that right here. After I do a couple of stitches through the entire thing, I don't want to do too many stitches there because I don't want it to be super visible. And I'm doing some stitches under my rosette. Okay, and then I'm going to just come underneath some of these here, so I want to hold my little flower in place. So I'm underneath where no one can really see it. I'm just doing a little stitch there. Then I'm going to go up through the knitting fabric where you can't see anything. And I'm going to do stitches in the inside of the rosette, just on the knitted fabric so it's not visible. So there's one. Alright, now let me do the other side. Okay, and then we have our little rosettes on each side. And I'm just going to trim off my thing at a slant there. And there we have the bonnet. And it really gives a sense, the satin lining really gives a sense of a more luxurious bonnet. You could use any kind, I almost use the same pink flocked cotton that I have on my pincushion here because I thought that would be cute. That would change, it really changes the look from more luxurious to a more everyday bonnet by just choosing the different lining fabric. So the liner covers up any kind of stitching inside and makes it really pretty. And here's the back part. And it's just a cute little baby bonnet to make on your loom. So this has been Angie from Canterbury Trails Farm. I thank you so much for joining us today. Bye.